Hello, I'm Helen Bradley. Welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can paint with multicolor brushes in Photoshop. Before we get started on this tutorial, I just want to show you my new ebook, which is available on Amazon.com, both as a printed book and also as a Kindle download. It's a book on 57 secrets for working smarter in Photoshop. There are all sorts of secrets here for graphic designers and photographers that will help you work smarter and more effectively in Photoshop. So I encourage you to go and have a look at the book, and it's also available on iTunes as a download. So now let's go and have a look at what we're going to do in this particular tutorial. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can create a brush that does like this brush is doing, and it paints in multiple colors in Photoshop. So let's get started with this tutorial. I'm going to add a brand new layer to this image and fill it with black, because black's my foreground color here, and I do that by pressing Alt Backspace on the PC, Option Delete on the Mac. Just going to get rid of the painted layer. Going to add a new layer that we can start painting on, and I've got some bokeh brushes that we've created. Now I did these in an earlier tutorial, so you may want to look at this tutorial if you want to see how to create these bokeh brushes, but I created a brand new one here for this particular tutorial. So I'm just going to size it down, and we're going to pick up our starter colors. Now I want to paint with a sort of blue, a very palish sort of blue, and a yellow. So I'm going to set these as my colors. Now you may think that it's not possible to paint in multiple colors in Photoshop, but that's not the case. It is actually quite easy to do so. So I've already selected my bokeh brush. I'm going to click here to launch the brushes palette, or I could click here and choose window and then brush, and that would show the palette. Now this is my brush, and at the moment it's painting like that, which is not what we want. So let's go to brush tip shape, and I'm going to size it down a little bit, and I'm going to increase its spacing so that it paints a little bit more like that. Let's undo that. We're going into scattering to just set up the scattering on the brush. I've got scattering on both axes, so it's going to paint something like that, which I think is a pretty good effect, although I do want it to have a size jitter. Now size jitter is under shape dynamics, so I'm going to add a size jitter and then a minimum diameter, and right now, that's how my brush is painting. So now, multiple colors. Multiple colors are achieved through color dynamics. And here is the color dynamics dialog. And I'm going to reset everything so we can see what options we have here. Now, purity is reset at 0. That's very, very important. All the others reset at 0, but 0 is down the left of the screen here. But with purity, 0 is in the middle. And the reason why purity at 0 is important is that if you bring purity down to -100, it's like a saturation. So all the saturation in your brush is being removed. So you will want to start with purity around 0% so that your brush actually is showing color, even though right now it's only showing the foreground color. Let's have a look at these. With foreground background jitter just set to 0%, you can see that we're painting with the foreground color. Let's see what happens when we take it up to 100%. Now we're jittering in color between the foreground and the background color. So we've got some variety of colors between blue and yellow. We're sort of halfway to where we want to be. With hue jitter, I'm just going to set this down a little bit. Let's go to hue jitter and see what happens. Now with hue jitter, instead of just jittering between the foreground and background colors, we're actually throwing in colors that do not appear between blue and yellow, because orange and pink don't appear between blue and yellow on the color wheel. So that is going to give us some additional colors. Let's just wind that back and see what happens when we choose saturation jitter. And here we're altering the saturation on the brush. Right now we're jittering between the foreground and background color, so we're between blue and yellow. We don't have any hue jitter turned on, but we're getting more and less saturated dots. So we're getting a variety of saturation, and if we combine that with hue jitter, then we're going to get a variety of saturated various colors. So let's just wind these two back to 0 for a minute, and let's have a look at brightness. Right now this is the standard brush that we've got jittering between foreground and background color, but let's see what happens when we take the brightness up to 100%, that jitter. And what we're doing is we're jittering between very bright and not bright colors, so we're almost going to black here, between black and very bright. So for our purposes in trying to get a sort of bokeh brush, we probably wouldn't want a brightness jitter of 100%, but we might use it at, for example, 50%. Let's just see what that gives us. That might be a more interesting effect. And as I said with purity, we'll want to have purity at least at 0 because we want to see color. If we take purity to -100, we're only going to paint in black and white and grayscale. If we take purity to 100, then we're going to get some really, really bright colors. So I'm just going to get rid of this layer. Actually, let's just trash this layer. Let's create a brand new layer. Let's just double check our brush settings. I do want a foreground background jitter. I do want some pinks and other colors. I will increase the saturation a little bit. I'm going to increase the brightness jitter just a little bit. I want purity set to about 0 here. I think I don't want a lot of variety there, and I'm just going to click that dialog, and now we can go ahead and paint on this bokeh effect. Now, having added those bokeh colors to that one layer, I can then decrease the opacity of the layer if I want to, add another layer, perhaps increase the size of the brush here. I could decrease the flow or decrease the size of the brush here, and now I'm going to paint using screen blend mode, so I get again a little bit more of a brighter effect, and again I can dial down the opacity and keep adding to this effect using this brush. So I'm Helen Bradley. Thank you for joining me for this video tutorial. Look out for more tutorials on this YouTube channel. Visit my website at projectwoman.com for more tips, tricks and tutorials on Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator, Photoshop Elements and a whole lot more.